You're listening to Disinfecting Sunlight with Paul Vasquez. And now here's Paul.
That big box furniture got you uttering profanity? Are you tired of staring at Grandma's dusty old vanity? Well, get it restored. Restored to sanity. With Restored to Sanity Furniture. Facebook.com/Restored to Sanity.
Well, hey audience, you're listening to Disinfecting Sunlight. I am your host, Paul Vasquez. But you already knew that. Yeah, we've gotten a little blonder. Something I'm trying out. But I am excited for you to hear this episode. When I first moved to Albuquerque, I was deep in my addiction, but I would get deeper. As I first moved to Albuquerque, I started reaching out to people who I believed were in recovery. And Sandy L was one of the first people I reached out to. I didn't meet her for almost a year after that. We officially had breakfast and I got to meet her partner, and it was just really, really awesome. But have you ever just been in the presence of someone and you're like, wow, this person is like, it makes a very articulate person say the word like a lot. Because typically I don't talk that way. But Sandy is just one of like the coolest, I'll say chicks because I think she'll appreciate that word, like the coolest chicks I've ever met. She just got a very bright energy and a very strong and fierce spirit about her. So I am excited for you to hear this episode, and she goes all in, and she's loaded for bear the moment I started questioning her. So those are my favorite kind of interviews. So on the other side of this, we'll be back with Sandy L. Audience, once again, we have Sandy L on the line. You can't see her, but you can see the most awesomest spider ever if you're watching, to my tens of viewers that watch. Now, Sandy is one of my friends in recovery here in the Duke City. I am grateful that I got to meet her. Well, we met online, but we actually met very recently when I decided to get clean again this time. Sandy, I apologize that I didn't record the first 2 minutes of your interview, but say hi, Sandy.
Hi there.
Hi again. Now, one more time for the audience. How long have you been clean?
It's been 1 year and 2 months.
Yes, girl. Now, that is freaking awesome. That is freaking awesome. That is right now. Well, I'm going to say my goal is 90 days, but tomorrow will be 60 days. Girl, bye. And you above, like most people, know how freaking hard it was for me to get there. Now, tell me what your life is like today. How would you describe your life?
Well, I am currently coming out of the COVID lockdown cavern world where, I got clean within. It coincided with the lockdown where I was completely shut off from everything and didn't have any outside social contact and, dealing with all the normal trauma incurred because of the COVID lockdown, being a parent, a single parent, going through a custody battle within all of that, and then getting clean at the same time. So it's like I'm reemerging into society and the real world, and I don't even know what the real world is. And it's in so many different ways because everything's different. Nothing's ever going to be the same as it was before COVID. And then it's also, I'm realizing that I've never actually lived in society clean ever because I've been using an active addiction on and off for my entire adult life for 20 plus years. And this is the first time that I'm actually venturing out into the world and going out and doing social activities and actually doing those things clean. And it's absolutely amazing. But yeah, it's like I'm learning how to human. But I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Like it's challenging and it's traumatic and it's painful and it's beautiful.
Girl, bye. Oh my God, that was like the perfect answer to the first question. Wow. Thoroughly impressed with that answer. Wow. Okay. All right. This is going to be a really good interview. So You are one of those like unicorns that was able to get clean during COVID. If I were wearing a hat on my beautiful blonde hair, I would tip it off to you, or tip it to you, or whatever that saying is. Now, that is amazing and miraculous, for lack of a better word. Now, let's talk about what it took to get you here. What was childhood like for you?
Well, as far as that goes, I hear a lot of stories of people having just horrible, traumatic childhoods that led into their addiction. And I feel like, I really didn't have that traumatic of a childhood. I mean, I was raised in a very stable household. I always had everything that I needed and wanted and more. Um, my while I don't feel like I was like a victim of abuse at home per se, my parents did spank and that sort of thing, which, that's a whole other can of worms to open. But as far as I'm concerned, that is abuse. So as far as that goes, that's what I experienced. But it wasn't like, um, often. And I always felt loved. My parents always made me feel loved. I was surrounded by love. I had all kinds of opportunities that a lot of kids don't have. We always had enough money to have everything that we needed. Um, I was a really awkward, really nerdy child. I was also really tall for my age my whole life. And so I really stuck out. I was this skinny, gangly, nerdy, awkward child. And so I did have a lot of issue with bullying when I was a kid. Um, I didn't Yeah, I mean it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. And I wasn't raised with we didn't have TV. And so I escaped into fantasy a lot, books. I was a total bookworm. And like looking back on it, I realized that there were little things that showed through way before I actually started using substances, behaviors that I exhibited as a child. I mean, as simple as, escaping to fantasy worlds, and just living in this world of imagination, alone, not interacting with anyone else, which sort of parallels how I ended up in my using later in life. Um, but, going from that to, I also did a lot of experimentation with, like doing things to my body as far as inflicting, um, sensation upon my body, pain, wounds, that sort of thing. Self-harm started real early, and it was always done very secretively. And it was always, looking back on it, it was always about control. And it's weird because it circles around in so many different areas of my life, throughout the next 30 years, uh, as far as things being about, like being in control of my body, but at the same time giving up that control of my body. And it's really hard to explain, but it's like both ends of the spectrum. And I know that that's all. Looking back on it, now that I'm clean and I'm processing all of this shit, I'm realizing just how much that lines up with all my addictive behavior, even though it didn't involve actual drugs. And so, yeah, I mean, I learned once I got a little older, I learned to stand up for myself better, and I learned that I could actually, get people to leave me alone if I acted really, really weird. So instead of just trying to fit in, which was not working for me, I started being as weird as I could be, and that actually scared people away, and so they'd leave me alone. And but then at the same time, I was able to develop connections with other weirdlings along the way. And so, I always had friends. I always was a social kid when I wasn't being tormented. Um, and so, but I always had this secret, um, part of my life that involved like doing things to my body to try and, alter the way that I felt.
Now, hey, thank you for sharing that. That's very brave. Now, you said you were doing that to kind of gain control. Was there a part of your life that felt out of control?
I mean, I guess I don't know. I guess it was all I can really think of is like my social life. The fact that I just really felt like an outcast, and no matter what I did to try and fit in, it just didn't work. And I was bullied about the way that I looked and the way that I acted, and the fact that I was always buried in a book, and the fact that I liked school and I got good grades, and I don't know, it was just like no matter what I did to try and fit in, I just constantly got made fun of and put down, and so I don't know, that's the main thing that I can think of.
Sure. And now this may be more than you can remember because it was such a long time ago. Do you remember what you're telling yourself at the moment you're cutting, or what you're feeling at that point?
God, I don't know, just to feel in general. Um, I don't know. I can't really explain it. I think that it was, while it was partly about the feeling that I gained from the act, it was also a huge part of it was the healing process and watching the marks and the cuts and everything heal. And it was like almost symbolic to watch those things heal. And I don't know. That's I really don't know. That's the best that I can explain that.
That is, wow, that's so incredibly deep and so, I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't advocate self-harm in any way, audience. But just that you could connect healing and have this kind of deeper spiritual lesson from that. Again, not advocating self-harm in any way, but that you would go there. Girl. Oh, wow. That was like, I have to process that. Wow. I've never heard anyone answer a question like that. You were something, girl. And I say that you're one of my favorite people. But I say that in the most awesomest of ways because you're such a deep, layered person. There is no figuring out Sandy. You'll never figure you out. And I love that about you. But that is just like, wow. Yeah, I'm going to process that after this is over. Now, so you implied that one of your earliest manifestations of your addiction was your reading. I'm very similar in that regard, except mine was reading, but mine was also movies. I would escape into a movie. You would always see me watching a movie, like girl. So I definitely can empathize with you there. Now, other than the bullying, it doesn't sound like you had much to escape from. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is. It really is. Like I said, I mean, my home life was good. I really, yeah. I mean, that was it. It's just the social aspect and all of that.
I do think that I think we're getting better at it as a society, but I think we trivialize how traumatic bullying can be, even if it's just words, or ostracizing peers. Like, it can be so incredibly traumatic without the victim even realizing how deep that trauma goes. I mean, it had you self-harming at one point, so I mean, it's pretty deep, pardon the pun.
Right. And I feel like even though I was sort of into escapism all that time, I am naturally an extrovert. And so I think it was really rough on my psyche, like, because it was ingrained in me to be a social creature and be friends with everybody and socialize with everybody around me. And then it was like I was always just too weird or too awkward, and wasn't accepted. And so it was like, well, what do I do? Because I still do. I thrive on social contact. And yeah, so I think that's why it was extra painful for me.
Wow. Now, this is going to be, well, I think you already answered it. I was going to ask, what did you learn about that period in your life, the cutting phase specifically, other than healing? Did it teach you any bigger life lesson?
Bigger life lessons? I don't know if in any sort of broad sense, really, no. But
I don't know if I asked that properly. Let me see here. Now, how did you go from cutting to, because it sounds to me like your addiction was about control, your cutting was about control. So how did control go from cutting to your addiction? How do you transition into that? Or were you doing the two simultaneously?
Well, so basically there was a point where the cutting turned into an extreme compulsion. There was a point where it wasn't just like a ritualistic thing that I did every once in a while. It was such a compulsion. By the time I was like 14 years old, it was an obsession and compulsion. And it was so bad that I would literally cut myself with anything that I found. I couldn't control it. Like if I saw a piece of broken glass on the street, I would pick it up and cut myself with it. If I was at people's houses, I would and if I ended up in their kitchen and there was like a kitchen knife on the counter, I would like sneak it out and take it into the bathroom with me and like cut myself with it. And so it became super unhealthy and super compulsive and just dangerous because I was using all kinds of filthy objects to hurt myself with, which could have, easily gotten horribly infected. And so it was truly harmful at that point. And it was also affecting my ability to function because I was so obsessed. And so that sort of then transitioned. It was about, that went on at that level for about a year, probably, before, basically my mom busted me. Finally, I had worked really hard to cover up all the time. Like, I had cuts hidden everywhere, and I always wore long sleeves and long pants, and I always had a big baggy flannel shirt on. And anyway, at one point, my mom actually saw me sleeping, and I had an arm hanging out, and so that's when she discovered that I had been cutting. So I had been doing it successfully and secretly for years. And anyway, once I got to that point, then I was forced into therapy. There was a lot of medical trauma leading up to that, which I don't really care to go into that much, but I will say that part of my story is that I have several incidences of really severe medical trauma, PTSD induced by incidents like that. And that was the first of them, was when I was forced to go to the family doctor and held down, and they pulled my sleeves up and made me, I didn't want to show them anything, and I was like held down against my will. And yeah, and that was rough. And so then I basically, at that point, then I was getting regularly checked. Like I had no privacy, and I was having to show my arms and my legs to my parents to like show them that I hadn't been cutting. And it was like I didn't have the right to my own body anymore. And so that was rough. And it was shortly after that I started dabbling in substances. So yeah, that's where that transition happened.
Wow. I'm going to say I'm sorry, even though I'm not really sorry for anything, but I just hate that you had to go through that. Like I'm literally feeling kind of that lack of bodily autonomy. Like I'm sorry. I'm really sorry you had to go through that. Wait, now, was there any family pathology of addiction that you know of?
Yes, but not drug addiction. Looking back on it, I realized that there's a shit ton of food addiction, gambling addiction, and shopping addiction in my extended family on my mom's side. So, but as far as actual drug addiction, there's really none that I'm aware of. I think I have a cousin at this point who's a pretty bad alcoholic, but that's like all that I'm aware of. And then my brother and I both ended up becoming addicts.
Now, what was I hate to phrase drug of choice, but it's kind of the most accepted. What was your first drug of choice?
Well, okay. So usually when someone asks me what my drug of choice was, I say I had two drugs of choice. One was yes, and the other one was more. And and then somebody once told me that if you're not sure what your drug of choice is, imagine being put in a room with every single drug possible, and you can choose to use one with no consequence, but only one. Which would it be? And so really, truly, the one that I completely fucking spun out of control with for the first time with any drug was crack cocaine. And I actually haven't used that particular drug in over 20 years. However, almost every time that I have a using dream, all these years later and all these dances with all these different drugs later, that's the one I dream about. So.
Girl, now, I've never done that drug, but I've heard a lot about it, and it's pretty chemically similar to my drug of choice. But tell me, how did you get introduced to that?
Well, I started out, so when at the time that I got introduced to that drug, I was dabbling in, regular powder cocaine. And it was really just a social use of that drug at that time. I would occasionally, it was like I had a couple different friends that we would occasionally be hanging out, and I wasn't a drinker at that time. I was still really young. I was like 19, and we would occasionally be like, "Hey, let's get some Coke," and it would be like, yeah, we'd get some, and we'd have fun, and then we'd run out, and then it would be over with, and then we'd come down and go to sleep and go back on with our lives and go to work the next day, whatever. Like, because that's a thing. That's totally not a thing in my existence now. But but at the time, I was able to control myself with that particular drug at the time. And anyway, so there was this one guy that I knew that I'd known since high school, and I was hanging out with him one time, and we're like, hey, we should get some Coke, and he's like, well, my dad can get some. And so I had never met his dad before. I'd met his mom, and I didn't even know he knew his dad. I'd never heard of his dad until that moment. And so then we went to this, what I now know is a well-known crack motel. I don't even think it exists anymore, but anyway, this is where his dad lived, was in this motel, that was a foreign concept to me. And so I go, we go, and we're these, he's like 18 and I'm like 19, and we walk into this motel room with all these 40 and up people just all strung the fuck out. And, we're just looking for some Coke, right? So these they're all smoking crack. That's what they're doing, but they're freebasing. So they're actually like, they've got the powder, and they're rocking it up. And so they've already rocked it all up. And I'm like, well, I want to buy some. And so they sell me this already rocked up stuff. And I'm sitting there trying to chop it up so I can snort it. And they're like, no, you can't do that. You can't do it that way. And I'm like, well, fuck that. I'm not going to smoke that stuff. And, so I witnessed, I just like forced myself to snort it, and they were all going crazy watching me. But anyway, again, it wasn't like a serious thing at that point. It was kind of like I could take it or leave it. Like, yeah, that was fun. Okay, I'm going to bed now. But, so my friend though, I watched his own father coach him through taking his first hit. And the craziest shit is I never saw that friend again. Like he was never the same after that night. I mean, it took him down that fast. And then there was a guy that I met while everyone was all cracked out, and I was just like bored and sitting there. And there's this guy who was like in his 30s, and I thought he was pretty good looking for an old man. And, I ended up like talking to that guy and exchanged phone numbers with him. And then I ended up, and he lived in the same motel. And Anyway, I ended up coming back and hanging out with that guy. And yeah, long story short, eventually I tried the shit and it was fucking on at that point. And I was absolutely hooked from that moment on, from the first time I tried it.
Damn. Now, where to go from there? Because there's so much to unpack. Now, without, you don't have to answer this if it's triggering, but to the audience, to someone who's never done that drug like me, what do you feel like?
Well, it's like this. That's the craziest shit. Is I can feel it just thinking about it. Like, all these years later, it's like this super intense. You go into this like vacuum, and like the sound gets weird, the acoustics get weird, everything gets kind of echoey, and then you just feel, just high as fuck, just like spun, for about 10-15 minutes. And then, and then you're like, it's like gone and you want more. It's like the super intense high only lasts like a minute or two. And then it's just like sort of a come down from that. And you're like, you're amped up and doing your thing, whatever. And talking a million miles a minute with whoever you're with. But like, it very quickly for me turned into, I wasn't doing it with anyone. I was literally hiding in closets doing it by myself. And, and it was just, and then it was like, it wears off and then, oh my God, I need more. And I would do whatever it took to get more.
And when did let's see here. When did your family find out about this? And how did they find out?
They found out when I smoked all my rent money and had to go beg them to help me out so I didn't get evicted. And I was actually honest. At that time, I told my parents, that I had been using this drug and that I had a problem and that I had spent all my money and I needed help paying my rent. And I was never going to do it again because I realized how badly it was fucking up my life. And they believed me and they paid my rent and saved my ass that month. And that's how they found out. But then I wasn't able to get clean.
Now, what happened that made you officially get clean from crack?
It wasn't, there were so many things that happened during my short dance with that drug. Like, I basically was using that drug for 2 years. Not even 2 full years of using it pretty much daily. And it wasn't, the shit that I got myself into, the positions that I was in, the amount of times that I could have easily died because of situations I put myself into in order to get that drug. None of that got me clean. I even had a suicide attempt in there because I had fucked over so many people in my life and had gotten in a position where I lost some people that I really loved. I burned bridges and it was very hard for me to process. And I decided that I couldn't deal with it and I couldn't go on living. And I attempted suicide and ended up in a psychiatric hospital for, I think, like 2 weeks. And all I could think about the whole time I was in there was using again. And the day I got out of there, I took off and tracked down what I needed. And so like that didn't change my mind. I found myself one night babysitting for my friend's child who was about 2 at the time. And she was over at my house. And I kept going into my bathroom and shutting myself in the bathroom and using. And then, coming out, I was regularly coming out and checking on the kid and interacting with her and stuff, but like it was just totally, what a fucked up situation. Like I was just holed up in my bathroom, and I found myself, at the time I was living sort of outside of town, where out in a wooded area, and there were no like street lights or anything. So it was really, really dark out where my house was. And I was in the bathroom, and I was absolutely convinced that there were people outside of my window shining flashlights in. And I found myself picking up my bath mat and tacking it over the window because I didn't have any curtains. And I'm sitting there just like freaking out, peeking through the, the whole peeking out the window thing. I'm sure you're familiar with that one. And but yeah, I was fucking peeking around my bath mat that I had tacked over the window because I was so sure someone was looking at me through my window with a flashlight out in the middle of nowhere while I have my friend's kid out in the other room that I'm supposed to be babysitting for. And it was at that moment that I was actually able to, for some reason, sort of float up above my body and take a look at myself in the situation and be like, what the fuck are you doing? And I made the decision at that moment to not use again, at least not that drug. And I actually never did. I never looked back, and I never touched that drug ever again after that night.
Wow. Well, congrats for that. Can I hear myself? Okay, congrats for that. That's yeah, and I have 1,000 stories like that of flashlights that never existed, and people scratching on the floor, and yeah, there's all kinds of girl back. Now, you said basically you said aloha to that drug in the goodbye sense, but you said aloha to another drug, and what was that drug?
Well, I went through an amount of time after that where I wasn't using anything other than the occasional alcohol binge. I was an alcohol binge drinker at that time, where I would hardly ever drink. But when I did, I would drink to black out puking drunk because I thought that that's how you were supposed to drink and that was fun. So I would do that every once in a while. And then the next thing that I moved on to very briefly was meth. And that was really short-lived because it really, really reminded me a lot of how I was feeling and acting on the other drug. And I was actually able to stop it in its tracks after a night of, lying in the dark in my room, hearing the rattling of the air vents and imagining that there were people in the air vents, and then they were crawling across my ceiling. And yeah, and I was like, what the fuck? This is happening again. I cannot do this. I cannot go down this road again. So yeah, I probably only was using that drug regularly for about a month. And then I was able to, I did use it a couple times a few years down the road again, but yeah, that was the next one that I toyed with. I didn't allow myself to get fully sucked in, and then that's another thing is I would do that over the years. That's why I would switch from one drug to the next, but then I would always like pride myself on, I quit this drug cold turkey because, when I want to quit something, I just quit it. But then I would secretly switch to something else. And yeah, it was just all about secrets and closet using.
Carol, now, what was it that got you into recovery?
Well, fast forward 20 years later, because that was, I was still just at that point, I was in my early 20s. I didn't get clean till I was 40. So, I went through periods of time where I wasn't using anything, but during those periods of time, what I did was I got fat. So like, I wouldn't be using any drugs, but I would just be eating to fill that void. And I know you're familiar with that one too.
Girl, bye.
So there was that. But I spent a really long time drinking. That was my drug of choice by default, I think, for a very long time, because it was just not only was it the more socially acceptable drug, but it was also the most easily accessible no matter where you go. So there was that. But yeah, as far as at the time that I decided to actually get clean, which originally was December of 2019. No, actually, I decided to get clean September of that year, but I wasn't able to actually accomplish it until December. I had been completely closet using. Nobody in my life knew I was using opioid painkillers and prescription amphetamine. Those were the two that because I quit drinking. Oh yeah, that's the thing. I quit drinking alcohol 4 years ago. And that was a huge deal. I pride myself on, oh, well, I quit drinking cold turkey, blah, 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 after drinking every fucking day for 11 years straight. But then I just switched over to these other two. I was alternating between opioids and amphetamine. And I was accessing these by stealing them from other people's prescriptions. I even stole from my dog's prescription for painkillers, which is something that I wasn't able to say out loud for a very long time because I have so much guilt and shame surrounding that. But I can say it out loud now. And I basically got myself into a position where I had been busted. I was stealing my partner at the time, he actually had a prescription for Adderall, which most people don't realize is basically meth. And he was one of those weird people that could actually take something as prescribed. And get this, he didn't even take it as prescribed. He just took it sometimes when he really was having a hard time focusing. And then he'd take like half the dose he was actually prescribed. Like, did you know that there are people that do that? Did you know that's a thing?
I think they're called unicorns.
Yeah. So I was just, I was sneaking his pills constantly. And it got to the point where, I was taking so many that it was obvious that they were missing. And I was like the master narcissistic gaslighter. And, oh, well, are you sure? Because it seems like you've been taking a lot of those lately. Anyway, it got to the point where I had been busted just one too many times and there was no getting out of it. And I was living with him and I had my child and, he was our place to live. And it took me, everything was just hanging by a thread. Like I was on my very, very last chance and I was going to lose everything, including end up homeless on the street with my child. If I didn't get my ass in gear and get clean. And so I made the decision after finding myself just completely not being able to control myself. Like every single time I would say, this is the last time I'm going to take them. This is the last time I'm going to do this. I can't do this again. This is the very last time. Every single time I would just cycle back around and do the same goddamn thing again and again. And every time I would find myself floating above my body, it's like I disassociated and I would look at myself from up above and be like, what the fuck are you doing? That was always the moment when I would decide to quit using a drug throughout my life, was when I could see myself from up above and be like, what the fuck are you doing? But this became like, it dragged on for 2 years, this whole cycle of, you got to stop this. You got to stop this. This is the last time. Okay. I'm not going to do it again. And then just fucking do it again over and over and over. And that I finally accepted that I was not going to be able to stop on my own and that I was going to lose everything if I didn't get help, outside help of some sort. And I made the decision to go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting by myself. And it was kind of interesting because I actually, with all the sneaking around and secrets and everything, I actually snuck off to an NA meeting. Like I didn't tell anybody I was going. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, is walk into that first meeting. But I'm glad I did.
Hang on a second. That needs a... Sorry, have to give you an applause there. Okay, that is freaking, that's very brave. Very, very brave. Now, I did want to ask, I may fast forward just a minute, but we're going to come back to this. Now, this whole, dissociating from your body and kind of looking down on yourself, do you think that's a manifestation of your higher power, or do you believe in the concept of a God?
God. I I I don't believe that is a manifestation of my higher power. I think that's a manifestation of my PTSD. However, I have found a connection with a higher power, and that for me is love. So that's what sort of brings me back to center, is remembering that, love conquers all, and like the truth will always shine through if you act with love. And so that's sort of, I feel like my higher power acts through me, through acts of love. Does that make sense? And it cycles around.
That makes perfect sense, and I love that answer. Okay, so you go to your first NA meeting, and how does that go?
Well, it was super scary and awkward, and I almost turned around and walked out, but then I was welcomed to sit down, and I sat down and I listened, and looking back on it, at that time I was not fully clean for the first 3 months that I was there. I wasn't fully clean. And I say that I relapsed after the COVID lockdown happened, because that was shortly after. I started going in December, and then the lockdown was that March. And I say that I relapsed within the pandemic, but in reality, I never fully stopped using everything. I was still using cannabis, and I found myself justifying that because it was, I had a medical card, and it's really interesting because I never really did use cannabis much at all. And I was trying to learn how to use it actually medicinally, and be able to figure out dosage and actually help take the edge off anxiety. And it's like I was not very good at that. And so I'd always end up too fucked up to function. And so I really didn't use it much at all. But then once I found myself clean from other drugs and in lockdown in a really traumatic situation, because that's a whole other story, I found myself using that heavily and excessively to the point where I was non-functional. And so that was when I realized that I can get out of control with any drug. It doesn't matter what it is. I'll take what I can get, and I'll take more and more and more. And that's, when I came to the realization that my drug of choice is more. And yes, because if that's what's available, then yes, I'll do it. And do I want more? Yes, always more. So then I made the decision on April 19th of 2020, after getting a hold of some more Adderall on the 18th. I made the decision to stop using everything, including the cannabis, and I have not looked back, and I have not used any drugs since. And I am still attending the NA meetings.
Yes, ma'am. I got to give you a...
Hallelujah. Thank God.
Okay, my silly little box over here, but I paid a fortune for it, so I have to use it. Now, I'm so... No, I know this interview is not over, but I just have to say I'm so grateful for having you on, because, girl, you brought it already. Like, you just... Sometimes I've got to, get people into it, and, it takes a little, 20 minutes of bluing them up and warming them up. But you, girl, you just came ready for bull. So I'm so grateful for that. Yeah, you're already amazing, but you're even more amazing. So now, it's been a year, a little over a year now. What's the worst thing you've stayed clean through? Other than COVID, because that seems very obvious. So, but then again, that is a very horrible thing. So if it is COVID, by all means, answer that.
Well, the worst thing, it's been some layers of some shit. So I don't know, I can list a few things that have been really monumental events that have occurred within COVID and within me getting clean. One of them being a major breakup, another one being a move, another one being losing a pet. A very beloved pet died. And also going through a really, really nasty custody battle. And that's sort of been the biggest thing, I guess, as far as being able to stay clean through that and actually being able to show up for that. and actually be present for my child and fight this fight, and do it using my higher power, which is love, and not just numbing myself and hiding from everything and just rolling over and letting my child's father, who also was my abuser, not letting him just get whatever he wants because I don't want to deal with him. So I've been fighting. I've been fighting really hard for a year and a half now, for custody of my child, who I still have custody of them, but the battle is still on, and I am showing up for it, and I'm fighting hard, and I'm really, really grateful to be clean and to be able to actually be here and show up for my own life and show up for the people that depend on me.
Amen to that. Girl. Now, how has, and this may sound obvious, but it may be different for you, how has your recovery affected your parenting?
Well, it's been rough in the sense that I am having to feel all my feelings. I've heard that, one of the best parts of recovery is that you get to feel your feelings, but then one of the worst parts of recovery is that you have to feel your feelings. And so I'm having to deal with unpacking a lot of trauma and a lot of stuff that I haven't been facing for a very long time. And so it's been hard to not be triggered by a lot of stuff when it comes to the behaviors of my child, which, my kid has been through a lot and has a lot to process themselves, and they are an innocent child that don't have the tools that I have, but at the same time, I don't have the tools either. So that's the problem, is that I'm having to start from scratch as far as learn how to properly deal with my emotions and process things, and not argue with my child and actually be a parent. And it's been very challenging. It's been very challenging, but I'm doing better. And while I'm in recovery, I'm participating in 12-step program, but I'm also participating actively in therapy, and that's helping me. I also, my child's in therapy, and I interact with her therapist a lot. And I'm just doing everything I can to be able to do things right, because it's not easy. And I'm doing the best I can. That's all I can say. It's been challenging. It's been very challenging.
I think you're doing an amazing job. Girl, I can barely raise myself, let alone a kid. Girl, bye. You are doing spectacularly, miraculously. Wow. Now, there's another big part of your story I really want to get to, so I'm going to make sure we do that. But before I transition over to that, what is the biggest lesson being a mother has taught you so far?
The biggest lesson being a mother has taught me. God, I don't know. I have to think about that for a minute. That it's not a job to be taken lightly. That it's one of the most important jobs in the world, and that there are so many key developmental milestones that can get fucked up so easily and traumatize a child for the rest of their life. And that while I can't make myself fully responsible to protect my child from everything, because that's, I'll drive myself crazy trying to do that. All I can do is, remember my childhood, remember stories I've heard other people tell me about their childhood, and also just remember that my child's brain it's not fully developed. And there are so many things that can influence that brain in so many ways. And the other thing is that things can be healed and fixed a lot easier, though, at that age. And so I guess a really important thing that I've learned is that it's okay to admit that I'm wrong and to apologize to my child and to say, I fucked up. Um, I'm sorry. You know
Wow.
what? I'm sorry for yelling at you. That was wrong. Like, that doesn't solve anything. And I'm sorry. And, I'm sorry that I said that. I'm sorry that I did that. I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's okay to apologize to your child. And that is something that a lot of people do not do. And so that's a big lesson I've learned.
Girl, you got me crying over here. I know you can see me. Wow. Oh, wow. I hope your daughter realizes what a great mother she has. And I hope you give yourself more slack than it sounds like you do, because damn, that's a huge lesson that I wish more parents were aware of. Wow. Just wow. Ooh, girl. I don't think I've said that many ooh girls in one episode, because I try not to bring that to this show, but damn. So now, transitioning over from motherhood to BDSM, because that's what we naturally do. So tell me about that part of your life. What does it mean to you? Where did it come from? Yeah, take it away.
Okay, so yeah, there was a point where the self-harm thing morphed into when I discovered that there was a whole world of BDSM where it's actually socially acceptable to inflict harm upon your and other people's bodies, and that it can be a therapeutic thing. And however, I entered it all wrong because I was completely in active addiction when I entered the BDSM world. And so like I'm gonna try to make a long story short. As far as I entered it wrong, I did it wrong for a very long time, and I found myself in situations that were not safe. I was never sober when I was in a BDSM scene, ever. I was pressured into things that I wasn't wanting to do. I did not understand that there was an actual concept of a safe word and that you were allowed to say, okay, that's too much, or, oh, I don't like that, let's try something else. Like I got all hardcore with it to the point that it was just like, okay, just beat me up as badly as you possibly can and cause as much pain as you possibly can, because that's what this is supposed to be about, right? And that was how I lived for a long time. And I ended up in a long-term relationship that was a master-slave relationship that I now know was not a master-slave relationship. It was just an abusive relationship. And it was emotionally and physically abusive. And I incurred a lot of trauma during that relationship. Then I had a couple other relationships that were more short-lived, that were similar, as far as, yeah, it was not a mutually beneficial type situation at all. I was basically just allowing myself to be abused horribly, thinking that that was what I wanted, and thinking that the whole giving up control was what I wanted. That's where that circles back around to that whole being in control by saying, hey, I want you to do these things to me, but then giving up control by like, oh, but I have no say over how far it goes. Like you just inflict as much as you can, and I'll take as much as I can, and it doesn't matter how I feel as long as I don't have to feel. And I'll just get as fucked up as I can before I do it, so I don't really have to feel the pain. But then it was just twisted. So I was in this world, entrenched in the BDSM lifestyle for almost 15 years using. And yeah, so, there's a lot. I won't go into a whole lot more detail about specifics, other than that I ended up in some really messed up situations that I never should have ended up in, that I allowed a lot of abuse to occur, and a lot of trauma has been incurred due to all of that. And so it's a lot of stuff I'm processing, but, it's come around now, because that was one thing I realized once I got clean was because it was like, there was this question, like, am I actually into that? Am I even into all of that? Because I don't even know. I don't know who I am. You know, I stunted myself at 15 years old, then again at 19 years old. So I mean, I'm really still a teenager in a lot of ways, and I didn't know, like, is this something I'm actually going to be into now that I'm clean? Now that I'm not like completely fucking inebriated all the time. And I've just recently started experimenting with it again, and it turns out I am into it. But it's totally different, and it's like the wildest part about it is that I'm taking the opposite role than what I always took. I'm no longer taking the submissive or the bottom role. And that's been really, really interesting how that's sort of naturally happening. And it's all been very organic, and I've been able to have a partner to sort of explore all of this with that it's just, everything's just sort of flowing, and we're, you know, taking it easy, easing into things. I've done some rope play with somebody else, with, you know, being tied up with rope, and it's like, it's a whole different experience, because it really is. It's like it is about a control thing, but it is also, it's a spiritual experience. And when my brain isn't clouded with drugs, there actually is a spiritual element to it. And it's sort of like you go into a different zone, and it's like a different state of consciousness, but it's like a state of meditation at the same time. Hey, I can do that without drugs. Wow. So like, I get it. You know, I had the right idea, but I was just mixing and matching too many things. And like, I had the right idea of wanting to have this like altered state of consciousness that has to do with my body and the way that my body physically feels. And, you know, changing and controlling the way that my body physically feels, sensations on the outside of my body, in order to transition into this, like trance-like state. But, you know, I wasn't allowing it to happen because I was doing all of that, but I was also using drugs. And so it was just, you know, I was doing it wrong. But I had the right idea. And now I am learning, like starting from scratch and learning how to do it right.
Well, thank you for going into that, because I have yet to have anyone on the show that has any kind of experience like that. I dabble in it myself. Audience, she's not alone here. I think it's kind of cool. But for the person who sees even the 4 letters BDSM and gets all like freaked out, can you explain to them how being in that world, being in that lifestyle, even being tied up would be meditative? Break it down. What are you feeling as you're literally roped up? How is that meditative to someone who's just totally scared or freaked out by even thinking about it?
So specifically, if you want to explain the whole rope thing, basically, and I prefer when I am being tied up in rope, to be blindfolded, and it's like a sensory deprivation type thing. So I'm more aware of my body, I'm not being distracted by visual stimuli. But that's just me. That's just my preference that I've discovered. But it's like a giving over of control of my body, but at the same time, it's a trust thing. And so it's like having somebody that you trust, to actually take control of your body. And that's a whole other step. And it's the actual feeling of being tied up. It's like it's a comforting feeling, because it's kind of like, I mean, like a hug. Like that it really is that simple though, because it's like that security, like a security blanket, like that being held tight, being the concept of, you know, like babies like to be swaddled. And it's like the same concept as that. Like, I feel safe. Like if I'm in a situation where I trust the person that I'm with, I know that I'm safe with them. I know that they've got my back. I can just sort of let go and just meditate and feel just like hugged and warm and safe. That's the best way that I can explain that.
Damn. Okay. I totally get that. And wow, that hour flew by. I could go on like another half hour talking about that subject alone. But I thank you for sharing that. And I thank you for being so, your candor is just refreshing when it comes to that subject, because I don't know why there's so much shame and like embarrassment attached to that subject, or just sex in general. But thank you for going there, and I wish we had more time to dive deeper into that. But thank you for going there. Now, as we wrap up this interview, what gets you out of bed in the morning, whether good or bad?
What gets me out of bed? I mean, honestly, I'm so enthusiastic about my recovery at this point. It's a matter of I'm happy to get out of bed every morning. Like, I'm glad to be able to wake up and not be hungover. I'm glad to be able to wake up and not remember what I did the night before. I'm glad to wake up not dope sick. I'm glad to wake up not wondering how the fuck I'm going to get my next fix. It's not a matter of what gets me out of bed anymore. It's a matter of I want to get out of bed. I want to get out and face each day. And yeah, there are challenges every day, but like I'm enthusiastic about facing those challenges and about showing up for life and moving forward. And I actually find joy in my everyday life now. I really, really do.
Okay, that needs a
happy day.
Okay, that was perfect segue. Wow, Sandy, I love you. I can't say that enough. Wow, girl, bye.
You too.
Now, as we wrap up, I'll try and make these, let's answer them a little shorter if we can. But if you're feeling inclined to answer long, by all means, I just don't want to keep you past your allotted time, but I have all night. Now, how do you define home?
How do I define home? Home is where I feel safe. And it's funny that you should say that. I'll just briefly say this, that one thing that I say to my child and to my partner is it's like sort of a mantra that I repeat when I know that they're having a hard time and they might not feel very safe. I will hold them tight and tell them, you're safe, you are loved, and you are home. And that's sort of something that's regular in my world right now. And yeah, that's where I feel home, where I feel safe. That is my answer.
Girl, I'm not going to press amen again, but girl, bye. Now, I needed this interview. I honestly say I needed to talk to you, and I'm glad the whole world, all of my thousands of listeners, gets to hear this. Wow. Because if I needed it, surely someone out there needs it too. Now, there's a recovery saying, stick with the winners. How do you define a winner? Is it necessarily someone with the most clean time or not?
As far as the winners that are within recovery, within the, so not just generally people in life, but people in recovery. Is that what you're talking about?
Not necessarily. However you define a winner, whether in recovery or not, however you want to answer it.
Yeah. People that enthusiastically show up for their own lives. Like that's what it's all about. Like being able to, but then at the same time, being able to accept that it's okay to be not okay sometimes. And I don't expect people to just pretend like everything's great all the time. I don't know, people that have a positive outlook and just make the choice every day to move forward but allow themselves, time to process and to grieve as well, because that's super important. And people that are just gung-ho and enthusiastic and never actually feel their feelings because they're just pushing everything down and moving forward, that's not winning. That's not winning. You have to feel the ups and you feel the downs. And like I said, that's what one of the best parts of recovery is being able to feel my feelings, but one of the hardest parts is having to feel my feelings. But like, I'm learning to actually feel those feelings and work through those feelings and do what I need to do to move through those feelings, and other people that are living their lives that way. And those are the winners, in my opinion.
Hey, man, girl, you need your own podcast. I just have to say that. I think you're better
No
at this
way.
than I am. Yes, ma'am. Now, round robin as we wrap up, try and answer these questions with as few as words, preferably few as many, the least amount of words. I can't talk today. I'm tongue-tied. Preferably one word. So we'll just start with life is...
Life is valuable.
Ooh. Honesty is...
Key.
Addiction is...
Destructive.
Freedom is...
Empowering.
Sandy is...
Joyful.
Yes. And one more question before I let you ask me a question. This is from Oprah, so I have to always give her credit in case she sues me, because, girl, she got billions of dollars. Now, what is the lesson that it's taken you the longest to learn?
That it's okay to not be okay.
Amen. Now, my favorite part of the show, he said sarcastically, but only because I don't like my interviewees to feel like they're alone, since I'm holding so much space for your story. Is there anything you want to ask me? I am an open book.
No, not really. Not at the moment. Do you want me to come up with a question to ask you?
Absolutely.
Is that important to you?
Yeah, just for fairness sake. I am a Libra after all.
Okay, yeah, well, so am I.
Yes, duh, I knew this. This is why we connected so well.
Our birthdays are like a couple days apart, I think.
They are. Hey, man, Libras.
So yeah, I get it. You gotta have that balance.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What a value have you taken from this interview?
Ooh, there's a lot. The first thing that comes to mind is I need to get to know you better and faster. Because I definitely feel like I've met someone that I'm very spiritually connected with, a kindred spirit, if you will. And I don't think those kind of relationships come along that often, at least not for me. So I think I need to value you more as a friend.
Aw, I feel the same way.
Oh, I love you so much.
I love you
I'm
too.
sending you a virtual hug, and hopefully we'll see each other soon. I'm picking up my 60 days at Young and Dopeless tomorrow, hint, hint. But I can't expect you to be there. But I will be there, and I am so grateful that you agreed. Thank you. I'm going to cry, and I'm going to buy me a big-ass piece of cake because I fucking earned it, okay?
Yeah, you have.
Girl. So I love you so much, and we'll talk soon. Thank you again, honey.
All right. I love you too. Have a good night.
Bye. Give Mel my love.
Okay.
Bye. Did you like that interview as much as I did? Because I thoroughly enjoyed that. Sandy, thank you again. I love you so much, and I can't wait to hang out with you more. If you like the show, if this is your first time listening, please make sure to subscribe. You can subscribe on any of your favorite podcast apps. You can watch us. YouTube links will be posted in the blog at disinfectingsunlight.com. If you have an idea for the show or want to leave feedback, you can write me at paul@disinfectingsunlight.com. If you have any information regarding my nephew, AJ Silva III's whereabouts, disappearance, probably murder, please give me a call, 214-997-4985. Again, that's 214-997-4985. Little AJ, I love you. And until next time, y'all, stay in the light.